Hello again. This part of the lecture, I'm going to go over some tips, tricks, and what not to do if you're feeling anxious during your speech. So, there have been a few myths about public speaking and things to do if you're feeling anxious. And there's a couple that need to go away. The first one is people who suffer from public speaking anxiety are neurotic. This is simply not true. Every single person suffers from communication apprehension or public speaking anxiety. It's a very common theme. And if you haven't felt it at all in your life, there may be a situation or a context in which you do. So remember, it's normal. It's okay. It's okay to be anxious in certain situations. A little bit of nervousness is actually a good thing. It's been proven that nervousness allows you, one, to prepare a little bit more for your speeches, but it also really helps you hone in on what you're talking about and focus on that delivery and focus on what you're saying. And that's the biggest thing. That's, I think, my number one tip that I'm going to give you today is focus on what you are saying. Focus on the content of your speech. You're going to want to think about things like delivery, like how long do I hold this gesture? Or when do I pause for emphasis? But if you're focusing on the content and you've kind of mapped out in your head, created that map of where you're going to go in your speech and what happens in each part of your speech that you're giving, this gives you guidance. And so if you do have a little bit of a fumble, a hiccup, a mess up, don't worry about it. Nobody is really going to think about that at the end of your speech. What people are going to think about is the speech itself. And that's what I want you to continue to work on. Work on that content and creating a visual map in your head of where you're going during that speech, what your gestures are going to look like, what your body movement looks like during that speech. And that's when you're going to get past a lot of anxiety in certain contexts, situations, uncertainty, all these things. Another thing that I want you to know is if you're telling a joke in your speech, make sure that you're a funny person, especially if it's going to be like humor. Humor is one of the hardest materials to deliver because you don't know what type of humor that the audience has. If it's dry humor, it's going to go over a lot of people's heads that don't watch The Office constantly. So make sure that you're really thinking about humor in your speech if you're going to deliver a joke. Make sure it's in the right context of your speech, and I wouldn't use it as an introduction. It's never that great as an introduction unless you know you're funny and you know you can deliver it. But if you're on the fence or you're not sure about it, don't do it. Another thing I want you to not do is imagine the audience is naked. This just doesn't work. If you've done it before and it works, then you have, one, a great imagination, but two, be careful because it can really mess you up. And it can, if it doesn't work, you're just even more frightened than where you started. So don't think about picturing the audience naked. Picture a mental map of where you're going in your speech. If you imagine in your speech, you're in one room, and then the next room is your main point one. And this is the kind of gestures I'm going to be doing in room one. And then you can kind of mentally go into room two. And this is your second point. Your door is your transition. Picture yourself in a house and going through and doing this throughout the context of your speech. This one will help you remember your content. But two, it'll help you with delivery and what you need to be doing at certain places and certain times. And this is kind of the mental map that will help you not necessarily think about the audience in front of you, but more about what you are going to do and say in those certain types of situations. So don't think about the audience. Think about you and what you're doing in those speeches. Another mistake that people oftentimes make is if they mess up once during that speech, they have a tendency of continuing to mess up because you get in your head about it. Remember, again, if you mess up once, nobody's going to remember that at the end. What people are going to remember is the speech in its entirety. So move on, force yourself past it, and start over from where you're at. Not the whole speech, obviously, but start from where you messed up and continue on. Just smile it off. If you feel like you've messed up, just smile and continue. And that's the best way for people just to not care. People are not going to laugh at your speech. They're not going to laugh at you for messing up, unless you obviously do it on purpose as a joke, but please don't do that in this class. So another myth that I do not want you doing in this class is writing out your speech word for word and memorizing it. That's when you're going to have a lot of issues because you'll start to forget. You'll forget certain parts. You might overlook one area and then have to jump back to it, which is never something you want to do in public speaking. This is why we do outlines. We do outlines where you do write it out word for word, but I'm not going to follow it word for word on your outlines. What I am going to do is make sure that you have proper supporting points for each main point. That's the whole thing. For each main point, making sure that the support underneath is different than the support you had for your last main point. So make sure that you don't have it completely memorized. But what I do want you to do is have equal support under each thing. So if you need to talk a little bit longer on your point one, or you had a different example or an idea that came up, you can continue doing that and know that that's not a mistake. That's not a mess up. If you have it memorized word for word, that's when you start stuttering. And that's when you start having issues about feeling like you messed up. So another thing, but going back on that, that does not mean you don't prepare your speeches. You do prepare it word for word, but you don't have to memorize it word for word. Another thing is your audience is not out to get you. I promise your audience is not out to get you, but you are out to please them. So make sure that with a few exceptions, you continue your natural state within your audience. Talk to them as if you're talking to friends. But you want to keep a sense of formality within a speech or a presentation. But again, your audience is your friend. If you show up to your speech 10, 15 minutes early, 30 minutes early, and talk to your audience members, that way you feel like you have someone in your corner. This will definitely benefit that whole idea that audiences are out to get you. So just make sure that you know everyone is nervous. Nervousness is good. Nervousness allows you to have a little extra energy during your performance. It allows you to stay alert. And if you feel like you're getting really anxious or really nervous in the middle of your speech, force a deep breath and smile and slow down. Some people talk faster when they start getting nervous. Some people start stuttering, both of which are resolved by the same thing. Deep breath and slow down. And it's okay. It's okay to do this and take a second, because I promise if you take 5 seconds to take a deep breath and slow down a little bit, the rest of your speech is going to be 10 times better. So before you give any speech in this class, I want you to think about things to prepare for your delivery. The first thing is getting a good night's sleep and a good breakfast. If you have issues sleeping before a test or a big day, you know you're going to be anxious about this speech, and so you're just rolling over in your grave that is a bed. Think about things that you can do to help calm you down. For me, it's turning on nighttime sleep time music on YouTube. This definitely helps me get a good night's sleep and forces me into a deeper sleep than I'd usually have if I were just to fall asleep watching Netflix. Another thing is a good breakfast. Breakfast quite literally means break fast. After you've slept a long time, you've literally been fasting for hours. So it doesn't matter when you break your fast, but what matters is what you eat when you do so. Try to avoid a whole lot of carbs first thing in the morning. Think about protein, maybe some fruits, some vegetables, something to help you that's good for you, rather than eating something like, toast. If you eat toast, have it with peanut butter. That will help you with a little bit of protein and give you a little more energy throughout the day. Don't eat your leftover pasta stroganoff from the night before. But also move a bit before speaking. Before it's your turn to get up and speak, move a little bit. Get out the crooks and nannies. I knew someone that used to do yoga before having to speak in front of a crowd and would just like literally come into the room after doing 30 minutes of yoga and just relaxed. And sometimes that helps, just doing a little bit of movement. If you need to go on a little jog before, do some jumping jacks in the hallway. That'll definitely help you too and help with like the nerves a little bit. But don't exhaust yourself. I'm not saying go run a 5K before your speech, but I do want you to do a little bit of moving, make sure your blood's flowing and ready to go. Avoid caffeine or carbonation and, alcohol. Alcohol does not help with anxiety if you are screwing up everything you're saying. Also, caffeine, if you drink way too much coffee before a speech, you're going to be like, I know this because sometimes I do this for class before I teach. And caffeine does not help with anxiety. It increases anxiety in the long run. So make sure that if you are drinking caffeine, you either drink the normal amount or maybe even a little less than what you would normally have. Remember, your adrenaline's going to be going. So you're already going to be focused. You're going to be thinking about this speech. You're going to go through it in your head. But I will tell you, you will be exhausted after your speech. So maybe save the caffeine for after you're finished. Oh, and carbonation. Don't burp the whole time. It's terrible. Don't do that. Dress up. That's another tip. Dress up. Do not wear, really raggedy, shaggy clothes. If you have a costume for a speech or a presentation, that's a way of dressing up, but dress up from what you normally wear. If you're normally wearing jeans and a t-shirt, maybe wear jeans and a button down or jeans and a blouse. These type of things will help you because it'll make you feel better about yourself. When you're giving your speech too and practicing, visualize yourself. What do you look like? Are you wearing something in particular that makes you feel more comfortable? Do you visualize yourself in a suit while you're speaking? These different things will help because it'll really help with the context. Remember the situation that you're in and the feeling of familiarity as you think about what you're dressing like. And visualize and speak positively to yourself. So remember, when you're giving your speech in your head, don't focus on parts that you might mess up. Focus on the parts that you're doing really well, and on the parts that you might be messing up on, focus on what you're still doing good about it and how you can do better. Don't ever say, this is terrible, I need to fix it. Say, this needs improvement, here's how I can better this area. So think positively about it. It will also release endorphins in your head if you smile. Force yourself to smile every now and then when you're practicing, and that will make you appreciate what you're doing in your speech a little bit more. And the audience pays more attention. I repeat, the audience pays more attention if you are smiling while giving your speech. So make sure that you're happy, you look positive, you look enthusiastic, you love what you're saying. Even if you don't, you've practiced it too much, you've worked on it too much, you just want it gone. Be enthusiastic. That way your audience cares as much about what you're talking about as you do.